Hello, folks. This is Joe with a very special announcement. On Friday, September 21st, I'll be hosting the Trap Set Live with special guests Rod Argent and Colin Blunstone, founders of one of my all-time favorite bands, The Zombies. After the conversation, Rod and Colin will play an ultra-rare, all-acoustic set of timeless classics. It all takes place at Ace Hotel in Palm Springs, California. This is an intimate performance and space is limited. Don't miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Visit acehotel.com/zombies for ticket information.
This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by Colectivo Coffee. Handmade coffee since 1993. Check them out online at colectivo.com.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I want to play something for you. You're hearing Memory Games by Here Lies Man, featuring my guests, multi-instrumentalists Marcus Garcia and Geoff Mann. The pair are perhaps best known for their affiliation with Antibalas Afrobeat Orchestra. Here Lies Man finds them combining Afrobeat-inspired rhythms with the heavy timbre of psychedelic rock. I spoke to the band in front of a live audience before a recent performance at Ace Hotel in Palm Springs, California. And now my conversation with Marcus Garcia and Geoff Mann. So you guys are both the children of musicians, correct?
Well, he is.
Yes.
And your father was a music producer? Or?
Yeah, he was a producer. My
So-
mother's a musician.
So yes, you're both the children of musicians?
Technically, yes.
What kind of musician was your mother?
She was a songwriter, and she played piano.
And your folks are both from Cuba?
Yeah.
And where are your folks from? Brooklyn?
My dad is from Brooklyn, from Brighton Beach, and my mom is from Georgia, farmland north of Atlanta. All right, Georgia in the house. There you go.
What kind of music was playing in your house when you were growing up?
From my mom, it was Billy Joel and Elton John and Aretha Franklin. And from my dad, he Steely Dan, and he would bring home weird Atlantic, like the new Atlantic thing, come from Atlantic Records. So like when Foreigner came out, he was really excited to bring it home and play it for us.
Was your dad on Atlantic Records?
My dad was on Atlantic Records.
So I should mention your dad was famed jazz flautist and woodwind player Herbie Mann, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And what kind of records did your father produce?
Well, it was mostly merengue. Mm-hmm. Maybe a couple of salsa records, but the label that he had was mostly merengue.
And what kind of music was on in your house?
Merengue? No, it was lots of different Latin music, salsa, merengue. But you know, my dad liked Bob Marley, and my mom loved boleros, like classic Cuban and Latin American slow jams.
Did you guys have any Foreigner albums in the collection?
No, definitely not Foreigner. Never entered the house. But it was. I guess it was somewhat mixed, but it was mostly Latin stuff, and then whatever was popular at the time. You know, like definitely Michael Jackson and Evelyn Champagne King.
What's your favorite Michael Jackson song? Or actually,
When I was a kid?
yeah,
Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, probably.
Can't
When
go
I was
wrong
a
with
little
that.
kid, yeah.
Is it still a favorite?
Oh yeah.
Or have you outgrown it? Because you
No.
qualified it as a kid.
Well, as a kid, yeah, well, because I can't tell you what it is right now. I wouldn't know. Because I listened. That was the Quincy Jones era
Yes.
that produced that, and in my adulthood, after falling in love with Afrobeat, then I went back and heard the Afrobeat influence because Quincy was being
for sure.
influenced,
Especially
by,
on like the song Thriller.
Yeah.
The guitar part especially is so Afrobeat.
yeah.
When did you start to develop a taste of your own, kind of distinct from what you were getting from your parents?
Probably when I was 12. My cousin was living with us, and then she was listening to Bauhaus and like Dead Kennedys, Skinny Puppy. Did
Did she have dyed black hair and like leather and black clothes?
No, not yet. Not yet. That was coming. At least the dyed black hair was. I don't know about the leather.
What about that music spoke to you?
It just had this gloomy kind of vibe, which when I went to Manchester as an adult, I understood. I spent some time in England. I was like, get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But no, there was like this feeling of that angsty feeling, and it was all coming from punk music, and that spoke to me.
I grew up in Milwaukee, which is kind of like the Manchester of
Definitely.
the U.S.
I see that.
So that music definitely made sense to me. And what about you? What was the first record that you bought with your own money, Geoff?
It was probably a Cream record, either Disraeli Gears or something like that.
And what is a record that you bought or owned that you would be reluctant to tell us you owned when you were a child?
Yeah.
I accept all the embarrassing things that I did. I think the deep collection of Rush records is hard for me
I was gonna say.
to fathom listening to now.
Really?
Yeah.
You just offended all of these Rush fans.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is a fucking drum podcast. I'm not gonna say anything else.
So if a Rush song came on the radio, how would you feel?
I would have a sense of nostalgia.
Would you feel pleasure on a visceral level?
Possibly not, and that might be the problem.
Is that because your brain is getting in the way, or is it because like you outgrew it?
I think the brain has a tendency in some music to get in the way of the music, and I think at a certain point I tried to stop using my brain more, and I realized that music that is very brain oriented was not serving me
Right.
in my musical path. And so a lot of the stuff that I listened to that was very brainy musically, I don't get the same enjoyment I did when I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he was pulling that off. That's
So it was
crazy.
an emotional enjoyment at the time.
It was. I mean, who didn't? I mean, every drummer, you were bred to love Neil Peart. Like, you opened the front page of every Modern Drummer magazine, and it was there. And like, I was supposed to love him before I even knew what Rush sounded like.
Yeah, I feel like I couldn't ever get into them as a kid, and then I gave them another chance as an adult.
And what was your
after
reaction?
I saw the movie about them?
The recent one on
Yeah, it's like a 3-hour-long movie.
Yeah.
It kind of made me open up to them again.
and musically, what does it make you feel?
I mean, that's an interesting question because I'm kind of working on trying to get that emotional feeling back. It's not like I listened to Rush that much, but after I saw the movie, I think I connected to their story on an emotional level.
I liked that it brought a personality to them that I didn't really know about before.
Yeah.
Which a lot of those documentaries.
So you saw
do.
the movie?
I saw the movie. Of course, I saw the movie.
Okay.
What's a record that you might be somewhat embarrassed to admit that you owned?
When?
Anytime. I guess as a child, but
I don't really collect music, you know. I don't know that.
You mean you don't collect albums?
I don't collect albums. I don't collect music. Just like people like have these. I mean, I have a lot of music because it's been given to me, and you know.
Yeah.
But I don't often go out seeking it. So.
Did you go through a phase where you did?
No, I mean, when I was out there buying music, I was I can say I think I am embarrassed by I was going to Bleecker Bob's in the Village to go buy Dead Kennedy's record, and I must have been like 15 or 16.
I would get all those through mail order, through the Alternative Tentacles mail order.
I mean, it was right there, and then there was one time where I just spoke to the guy in a faux British accent as a kid.
Like you were trying to, you were like,
yeah, I was just gonna try it on.
Trying to
it's
sell
like
it.
a new personality thing. I'm embarrassed by that, I guess.
What do you feel when you hear a Dead Kennedy's record now?
The same as I did before.
It holds up.
Yeah.
The lyrics don't necessarily hold up. I mean, they're very, very specific.
Yeah, but I still appreciate it, and it's the timbre of his voice. It kind of like raises your blood pressure, gets your heart pumping a little bit,
I think the whole band was just fantastic, too.
Absolutely.
And then, how did you two guys meet?
Antibalas.
Yeah. We both started playing in Antibalas around the same time.
Yeah, it's middle of 2003, around then.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of our first full tours was the same tours to California.
Tour.
Is it true that the first Antibalas show was at St. Nick's Pub?
That's
I don't
the story.
know. Is it?
Okay.
I'm sure it was.
I
We
used
weren't
to play
there,
there
so-
sometimes.
No, the first we weren't done. We came
Okay.
later.
Yeah,
I came
okay.
in the 5th year, but I think it's possible that it was there. Sure, but there was also wasn't Rikers Island. They played at the prison.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
one of the first gigs.
I don't know. I think the St. Nick's thing is the general story, and I've never had any
I
reason
never
to.
read the band's bio, so
I thought maybe you discussed it with your band
no,
members.
I never read the bio.
What did you feel like your creative role was in the band?
I think for the first few years, a creative role wasn't really being encouraged.
So would you say that it would be more like acting in someone else's play?
Well, I came in for Gabe Roth, who was the original guitar player.
Yeah.
And
Gabe Roth, who's famously kind of the figurehead of the Daptone label.
Yeah, he went. He had already had a band with Sharon Jones, and so I think at that point these guys had been on the road for 5 years, and they had a whole thing going on that I was stepping into, and I remember early on feeling like I don't want to be part of any of this drama. I don't want to be
So why did
into
you
it.
join the band then?
Well, I mean, I'm saying I wanted to join the band because I love the music and I love the band. But I went in there with this sense of trepidation around, once I started to understand some of the dynamics that were happening, I was like, yeah, I don't want to get involved. And then little by little, I just got roped in, and then I was...
That's because your heart got tugged into the situation.
my heart got completely... It's still wrapped up in there.
And what would you say your role was?
My role, originally when I started playing with him, I was playing Shekere, and my role was described to me very quickly before the first show. He said, you're either going to play or you're going to play and don't stop. And that was my role.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to playing cowbell in a Latin group.
Sure.
And I think it's interesting that you can kind of distill all of your attention for that time you're on stage to that one very specific task and try to make it as meaningful as possible.
Yeah, you just got to watch out for that one dude like 5 rows in who's just like wide-eyed and staring at you and going just pointing at you at every beat. And he's just and it can start like to make you freak out a little bit.
For bands like Antibalas, where do you draw the line between cultural appropriation and then paying tribute to that culture?
That's a very good question. Marcos?
I feel like that's been part of the conversation around the band from the onset. I don't actually know. I mean, as I think about it, I think part of Cuban culture is African, is West African.
Yeah.
In its DNA and its musical DNA, and
It's even called Afro-Cuban music.
yeah, and I never personally felt like any sense of appropriation. It's so if anything, it's when the first time I heard Fela, I knew I had never heard Vela.
Right.
I was fairly certain I'd never heard his music, but the music itself sounded. I knew it. I felt like I had heard it before.
No, I was asking why you were appropriating music from Birmingham, England.
I mean, that was also part of where, just growing up in the burbs of New York City, there was that
Isn't
sense
it
of
interesting how they
disaffected
don't
youth.
talk about that, though?
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
I guess it's because British people are not culturally as oppressed historically. So that's why
That could be.
Yeah, I guess.
We got theories here. We can only have theories. Yeah, so as far as appropriation, I never personally felt like that was part of my own personal narrative. I'm very comfortable playing West African music and Latin music and Cuban music. It's part of my just cultural DNA. I think there's lots of other things connected to that in terms of race and class and privilege. Those are different, aspects of a similar conversation. But I'd say, culturally, to me, it's very second nature. It's very part of,
Not for me.
Are you Jewish?
I am half Jewish. Yeah. I think I just approached it. I didn't really think about it going into it, but then I realized that I didn't feel like I was going to put on like a dashiki and like try and act a certain way that wasn't really part of who I was. So I just approached it by playing the musical part as strongly and supportively for the rest of the band as I could. That's for me, it's something I think about all the time. I grew up thinking about it. My dad talked with me about it because that was part of his life too. I mean, and so it's something which I have a hard time not thinking about. And maybe, I don't know, overly, but definitely it's always there.
Being the child of a musician, did it seem appealing to be a musician when you grew up, or was there a period where that was the last thing you wanted to do? There was very few points in my life that I can remember not just assuming I was going to do music, and it wasn't pushed on me at all. My dad definitely didn't push any of us to play instruments or to do anything musically, which is probably one of the reasons why I felt really comfortable doing it. He was very hands-off with the whole thing. And it's just very early on, I realized that I was, decent at doing it, and it just seemed... And of course, there was nobody in my family who could say, well, you'll never make a living doing that, because we were being supported by someone making a living doing that. Did he ever go through rough times that kind of scared you out of it?
We weren't very aware of the rough times he went through. As far as I knew, things were, fine all the time. And I was born kind of at the peak of his career, so it was hard to see.
He was like, "This is going to be great. Let's have a kid. This is going to keep going." And you have kids, right?
I do. Two boys.
Do they play music?
My older son has been taking guitar lessons, and he has been interested recently in playing some drums. My younger son has the ability to do stuff, but doesn't have much interest right now.
If your son does express interest in learning to play drums, what will be your approach to helping him?
Kind of just letting him figure out what his path is and answering any questions if he has them. I don't want to be too guidey, because I found that when I try and tell him things that I know about, it ends up turning him off to the whole process, except if I just let him go for it, let other people teach him, and then he's like, oh, Dad, what happens when you do this? And then I can answer a specific question, and it's kind of his control over the situation. I think it gives more opportunity for him to take ownership of that, maybe.
Did it induce any anxiety to have kids and thinking about how you're going to provide for them as a drummer?
Specifically as a drummer? Yeah. I mean, not any more specifically than anything else. I mean, I'm not really much of a planner. So, we were having kids, and I wasn't going to change anything about my life. Well, I mean, I did. I actually stopped. We moved to LA right around the time my first son was born, and I kind of stopped with all the bands I was playing with in New York and started working towards film scoring and things that were not so tour heavy. So it was definitely shifted a little bit to be able to be home a little bit more.
And then I came along.
Do you have kids too?
I have one, yes. Well, two.
And you say
two.
You came
technically
along.
Two right now, yes.
Wait, what do you mean technically two?
Well, my girlfriend and I are raising her 5-year-old. So she's my daughter for sure. And my oldest daughter is 21, actually.
How old are you? You look so young.
Are you supposed to ask that? 44.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You got started early.
I did.
And is your daughter a musician?
No, I made the mistake that Geoff was trying to avoid.
You tried to guide her too much.
Well, I think she did sing in the choir all through high school, so she it's not like she doesn't have some musical ability. But I think when she was early, I was so eager to just goof around and record it, and I think her hearing it back, she wasn't really, I don't know, she just kind of got turned off after the second recording. I think she realized
hearing herself back?
Yeah, I don't know what it was, because like I just love recording and manipulating sound, so I recorded her reading a story and then I put it to music. It was called The Chihuahua with a Funny Tale. And it was about a chihuahua that had a party and then it got upset and kicked everyone out and then just spent the whole night dancing by himself.
What was the music that you made for it?
It was like a Casio. This is how I had started a whole solo career as Chico Man. Started with her, with this little Casio that was my mom's originally. And I recorded the beat was like, you know that beat,
with
right?
The fantasy setting or flute or...
It probably had no, I don't actually know. It was it's probably rock one.
Okay,
or pop one. It was probably pop one. And
it's a good one.
Yeah, it was kind of like an R&B and yeah.
And then she was just like, "Fuck this. I do not want to be a musician."
I took it that way cuz she never wanted to record again.
What's with this? Like, I feel like the name of the band and then your surname and then your previous project, Chico Man. It's all very confusing.
I know.
Did you do that on purpose?
He did it.
But also, your last name isn't actually Mann, or is it? Or your father's
is.
what?
My father was not born Mann, but he legally changed his name. But it was a stage name. They're all stage names.
So it's stage names. That's what happened. Here Lies Man it just came out of my mouth when I was working on the song, and it kind of captured the spirit of the whole project, so one extra man, what's that going to hurt?
My question is this. So your daughter did not like to hear herself recorded back.
Well, if she hears this, I don't actually know.
Okay.
I don't know why she didn't. I never asked her, actually. I feel like I need to ask her now.
Before this gets released.
When you listen to yourself recorded, do you enjoy it, or do you hear just nothing but the flaws?
Yeah, when I'm in the creative process, it's fine. But I think if it's not something where I can where I don't have any control over it, then yeah, I don't like listening to interviews. I don't know if I'll listen to this. It's just hearing my own voice.
It took me about 100 of these before I got used to even hearing my own voice.
But you listen back to your show?
Now I don't, but now I can.
So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like you don't though.
Yeah, because I lived it, bro.
Exactly.
What about you? When you hear yourself playing, when you hear yourself on a recording, do you like the playing? Are you proud of yourself?
When it sounds good, I'm really proud of myself.
What percentage of the time does it sound good to you?
Probably 30%.
Low 30s.
More with this band, actually.
Let's talk about the impetus to start this band. How did it come about?
Well, the story I tell, this is as close as I can get to putting it all together, but in 2005, I was recording a record with Antibalas in Chicago at John McIntyre's studio, Soma.
Yep. Now he lives in Nevada City.
Yeah. And we were there for 2 weeks, and there was a lot of time to kill in between takes of things, because when there's 12 people and there's overdubs, you're just kind of, so I was holed up in the studio, and I was playing Yellow Fever, the tenor line to Yellow Fever. I was learning actually the parts, just kind of studying the song and shedding it. And I was playing Yellow Fever, and I just heard that like Tony Iommi sound in my head, playing, hearing the riff as I was playing it, unamplified, and that kind of was my light bulb moment.
You're like, why don't we put together chocolate and peanut butter once in a while?
Yeah, well, I just saw that there was there wasn't much distance between Afrobeat and rock if you approached it from the angle of a guitar riff.
And how did you get this guy involved?
Well, I mean, when I was in New York, I moved to Los Angeles almost in September, it'll be 3 years. And before that, so starting in 2012, I started to, pitch the idea to people and, not necessarily audition, but try it out with different drummers. And it just didn't quite click for me, and I kept trying. There was several. When I moved to LA, I was renting a studio downtown, and I just had a share in it. So all my gear was stacked up in there, and I invited Geoff to come down. I had sent him my little voice memos of the stuff that I had recorded over the course of a few years, and it was literally just as soon as I got a sound and Geoff was set up and we started playing down one of the things, I was just like, it was seconds, and I was like, that's it. And I think as we talked about it early on, it's just that feeling of swing and that rock and roll being, the feeling of the drums being led by that whole kind of Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa school of swinging, and
which is where people like Bill Ward got their thing from, for sure.
Yeah, and so Geoff understood that kind of musical reference that needed to be, that was part of already what I was intending. I don't think I had even verbalized that. I just knew it needed to feel a certain way, and then, like I said, it was only a matter of seconds, and I was like, yes, this is it. And then my thought was, how do I get him to be in it? And because I already had it in my mind, the touring and all this, I already had this vision.
How do you pry him away from his children?
Because I knew he moved out here and he was, family man, and here I am, this road dog coming in with these crazy ideas.
Well, when you were touring a lot and you were raising your first child, what were the challenges that you faced?
Everything was a challenge. I mean, everything was a challenge. Just when I would come,
and you knew you were going to put him through that same challenge.
Well, his kids are older than when I started going on the road. I think.
Yeah, if this was 5 years earlier, it might have been a really, really tough sell.
Yeah, it would have been a tougher sell, definitely.
So, Geoff, earlier you mentioned that you're more satisfied with your performances with this band on whole than previous projects. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think this is the hardest and loudest I've had to play for long periods of time. I mean, I've done a lot of jazz and I've done a lot of mellower rock, but this is, I had to change my whole setup in a lot of ways to compete with the volume of this, and because I've been trying to find a way early on to keep the subtlety and the jazzy inflections and the buzzes and all the little cooking in the kitchen things that was what why Marcos and liked what I was doing, but also at a higher volume, and that's a tricky thing. So I've been, just playing more and paying more attention to not my technique, but just my being able to do all that stuff and focusing on my playing in a way that I haven't done in a long time. And it also just, the music feels weirdly natural from when we started doing it. It just made so much sense to me. Like, it was all the pieces of everything that I had ever worked on in my entire life all focused into one thing, which I didn't think was possible.
This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's fucking great.
Well, so you mentioned that you're only happy with about 20 to 30% of the recordings that you make.
I don't know if that's actually true, but okay, sorry. I'll let you finish.
I mean, that's
your
question.
That was my answer.
When you're playing live, though, how often do you get to that special place where you're really feeling it?
How often I would get to this special place versus how I feel about it when I listen to a recording later.
I'm saying, how often do you get to a place where you're experiencing a sense of ecstasy versus not getting there?
I often feel that way when I'm playing. Sometimes I feel like there was a great show, and then I will hear a clip of it later that does not represent the way that it felt to me at the time when I was playing.
That's why I don't listen.
There you go.
If you feel something in the moment, that's true.
More real.
That's more real. And then to go back and hear some secondhand, rendition, doesn't feel the same.
But sometimes it does. Sometimes I go back and hear live shows, and it's like, that felt great to me. And I
sometimes you think the show went terribly, and then you listen back, and it's better than you thought.
Exactly. Often it is. Not always, but often is the opposite. So if a show that I felt like shit about could actually sound really good, and a show that I felt...
I've tried to convince myself of that, but then I went and listened really carefully, and I was like, yeah, no. If it was recorded in a nice way, it gets across a certain feeling, but if you felt, to me, if I had a shitty performance, and I've had that illusion where it's like, you know what, that wasn't so bad, and then I listen to it, I'm like...
So the difference,
there. It was captured.
So there's a specific aspect of it which comes out when I'm thinking about this. It's the anxiousness in the playing, which comes across not necessarily in tempo, but just in terms of like how much things are sitting into a beat. Mm-hmm. It's not really about like if I missed a hit or if I didn't, play a thing right. But if it sounds like anxious to me, sometimes that feels really good in the moment because you're all hopped up on adrenaline. But so it's really just about that one thing where it really bugs me when I listen back because I felt so good, and then the translation to the audience is like,
The audience might have felt really good, too.
Maybe they felt great, too. I don't know, but I'm allowed to judge myself on that, Marco. Sorry.
So you guys have a new album coming out.
Yeah.
What's it called?
You Will Know Nothing.
And how did you come up with that name?
I was asked this not too long ago in another interview, and
I thought I was an original thinker.
Well, I mean,
but I guess
because
I
the
was
thing
wrong.
is, I don't. So one thing to understand about the project on the conceptual level, on lyrically, is that it's all meant to be transpersonal and non-narrative. So whatever meaning you draw from it is the meaning.
Sure.
And for me, the connection is the idea of no thing being the actual meaning of the word nothing, right? You take for granted the word nothing, but then if you think of it as no thing. Listening to an Alan Watts lecture was, when I was, I don't know, maybe 18 or 19. That concept stuck with me the whole time, and it's kind of, on some level, it informs lyrically and conceptually what's behind Here Lies Man.
What did you try to do differently, if anything, for this new album? The first record was meant to be a proof of concept, and I had just moved. Literally, we recorded the rhythm tracks a month after I arrived, and it was DIY all the way. And so the second record, I wanted to flesh out some of the sonic landscape
a little bit more and spend some more time with the keys, and we spent more time on the mix. The first record I sent to New York to have Jeremy Page mix it, and then the second record, Geoff and I mixed it, and went down this really long rabbit hole as we were producing music for other people, and so we'd kind of get back to it, and then put it down for a second, and then come back to it. And I never worked that way before, so it took much longer to get the finished product. But
you mean you never worked in such a way where you were also on other projects for other people? And
yeah, normally when I work on
wholeheartedly
something,
focus on
I
it?
finish and then move on to the next one. But in this scenario, we were juggling other people's music that we were producing at the same time.
And you were going out of town with Antibalas.
And I was coming in, and so it just took a long time.
Do you feel like you were able to use that to your advantage?
I think by the time we finished, we had some measure of hindsight on
Right,
the process
right.
that you don't normally get.
That's right.
But I don't know that I would choose that.
Yeah.
Because I like just, you're doing it, you commit to what feels right in the moment, and then you move on. And if you have some misgivings about something that happened, for me, you just address that in the next recording.
Right.
But it's more important to have, to keep building your catalog than to be obsessing over he knows what I obsess over. My many obsessions.
What do you obsess over?
I mean, when we're mixing, it's like anywhere between
Balance?
2 and 4K, and then the panning, and it's mostly 2 to 4K is that's finding where that goddamn frequency is and pulling it out of there, or making something pop out. It's the bane of his existence when we're in the mixing process.
Do you feel like it makes it better?
In the end, it does. I mean, what's better?
Does it make you feel better?
No, it makes me feel terrible.
Yeah.
So because like I'm sitting there working on something, and all of a sudden I hear, and he's trying to like whistle the frequency that he wants to get out, but it's just like I start having these like Pavlovian twitch responses every time I hear him whistle, because it happens all the time.
You just aired all our dirty laundry. That's between you and me in the studio.
What else you got? What else? But what bothers you the most about this guy? God damn it! He'll get a turn next.
Yeah. No, nothing.
All right, fine. This interview is over.
We get along great.
I think we did. You probably do get along. It seems like you get along pretty well.
We get along pretty well, surprisingly.
We balance each other out. He's just saying he doesn't plan. I can't stop.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you got planned after this next record?
It's already being mixed.
After the second record, you already have a third record being mixed?
Yeah, the EP was being mixed, and we started demoing out what will be the full length that comes out after that.
Are you changing it up at all for the next one?
I mean, it's constantly evolving. I don't think we're changing.
You don't plan it out. You don't plan that part of it out in advance. You're more like a logistical planner.
That too, no. But I mean, I am planning out. This record, I will say, one of the things that was planning that we've brought to fruition is integrate the interludes into the body of the song. And so, from the inception, there's these heavy, musical pieces, and they're always punctuated by a musical interlude that kind of releases the tension, which is also connected to the concepts behind the band, which is that we're playing the music to this imaginary movie. And, every night we are recreating the soundtrack, and the movie changes. So
the movie in your mind changes every night?
Yeah, but I mean, you can, there is something evocative about the music just in the DNA of it. I can say that dispassionately because I don't feel like I control what that is.
Right.
Getting back to the idea of the transpersonal, it's kind of like I use this rhythmic filter that I have inside of me, and I receive this information, and then we recreate these moods, and that's what I call the movie. So depending on the day and the venue, and this space kind of feels like, I don't know, people should be drinking mead or something here. Maybe that will have an influence, an effect on how the movie is delivered tonight.
But seriously, what do you hate most about Geoff?
I don't. I will say For the longest time, I always wanted to have a musical collaborator, you know. And when I moved here and we started working on arrangements of things, I was like, I can't believe it was Geoff.
You finally found it.
I finally found it. It was amazing. And it's been
That's
amazing.
life affirming, because when did you move here?
Almost 3 years ago, but not even.
So how old were you at the time?
41.
41. So you can still find love at age 41.
Yeah.
You can find
absolutely.
it, like, seriously, you can find a profound connection with somebody.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it, and we'll all think about the movie that we're going to see in our mind. Thank you so
Let's
much for
talk
doing this, guys.
Thank you, Joe.
It's been a pleasure.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.